again. First spirit. Quote, I don't see dead people. Spirits are very much alive. They are alive in another dimension, end quote. Judy White Wolf. Now my little Jack Restart quotes. That have to do with the chapter. My first experience with a spirit, and the only one I really remember from childhood, other than the aforementioned invisible friend, was when I was around 4 or 5 years old. It was the spirit of a little girl who had lived in the house next door to the first house we lived in Kentucky. The woman living there at the time would come over to chat with my mother, and eventually she brought up the subject of ghosts. My mother was open to things like that, and so the woman told her about her experience. I was not allowed to hang out for long during these conversations because they were worried I would be afraid to hear the stories. I didn't usually listen to them chat. I had more important things to do, like playing with my Barbies or my little people and creating their worlds and living in my home. All I remember of the woman's story and what made me pay attention to their conversation in the first place was that there had been a little girl haunting their home. She said that the ghost was not happy and was confused because she was looking for her parents. The ghost would take pictures off the wall, throw them across the room, knock things over, and basically create chaos. The woman said that when the things first started flying around, she did not see who or what was doing it. But I did, and I pictured it, and I pictured her. Instead of being scared, she got angry and told the spirit to show itself. Gradually, the little girl showed herself. Knowing the story of why the previous owners had moved, she now knew who she was dealing with. My neighbor asked the girl what was wrong. Who was she? Or why was she so angry? Sorry, the light's shining in, I can't. Why was she so angry? The girl replied that she missed her parents and could not find them. The woman proceeded to explain that her parents had moved away after the little girl was killed and informed her that she was in fact dead. I think during this story, the way we had a dining room and living room set up and there was a door in between, and I was told to leave, so I went behind the door but was listening. Still remember all this like it's yesterday. At first, the spirit did not believe her, so my neighbor had to point out the fact that none of her family's belongings were in the house. Everything was different and belonged to the new owners, her and her family. She then told the girl she had to move on to the light, and she would then be able to find her parents. After the detailed explanation, the spirit moved on. However, as the woman was telling the story, I could feel the little girl and totally picture her. I still can. I could even see her throwing things and looking around the neighbor's house. I pictured this in detail and had never, at that time, been inside the house. Later, when my mother was working, the neighbor would babysit me, and the house was very familiar. I could feel what I know now was residual energy from the sadness associated with the previous family. I also eventually had the opportunity to describe to the woman what I thought the little girl looked like, and she got a bit choked up. She turned a bit pale and teared up a little and said, "Wow, you just described what I saw, how I saw her." My mother said something like, "Oh, you must have overheard us." And the woman said, "I never told you what she looked like, let alone what she was wearing." Goosebumps, can you see that? Goosies. I never really thought much about the little girl, other than I wish she was still around, alive, to play with. Then a while later, maybe a few weeks, I was alone in my room playing with my dolls and started to think about the little girl being a ghost. I was scaring myself a bit, so I began talking out loud to pretend I wasn't scared. I said, if that girl is here, I'd ask her to play Barbies with me. And at that moment, oh, Goosey's again. Goosey's. And at that moment, one of my curtains blew up and over my head for a few seconds, then drifted down. So we had like those sheer panel curtains, just the little plain. So I'll probably see it down here, but yeah, just one panel came up and went over me. And when the curtain wrapped around me, so it kind of went over my head, when it wrapped around me, it felt like someone, child size, putting her arm around my shoulder and hugging my neck. I freaked out because I felt it. The curtains were very light, but I felt someone there. Freaked out and ran out of the house and stayed out as long as I could. Now, yes, my window was open, but it was a calm day and there was no wind. And even if there was a breeze, both of the sheer curtains would have moved, and only one did. Looking back, I regret not continuing the contact, but as a child, you don't really know what to do. At least I didn't. I still see her the way I remember, and maybe one day I will research and find out more. Also, being young, and when you try to bring it up to people, they're just like, oh, your imagination. Quit making stuff up. What ifs? Now I know better. How are we doing on time? Let's see. Should we do one more? This one's a little longer. You know what? I'm going to, so you don't get bored, because we're at like 7 minutes. Since I'm explaining some fun stuff too. This is actually kind of cool. Because it's reminding me, because like I said, did this book 11 years ago. I probably haven't read it in 8 or 9 years. So even bringing up the memories again, and so many are still there and so detailed. And the fact that I still get goosebumps, it's fun. I can't wait till I get to the last chapter. That's going to be the fun one. That'll be fun. And I'll explain more of that when we get there. But until the next chapter.